In 1981, there was Raiders of the Lost Ark. In 1984, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And in 1989, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. The mild-mannered archaeologist became an instant cult hero throughout the world, his exploits thrilling audiences from Beijing to Buenos Aires. These films are a piece of cinema history. The advent of computer-generated imagery means that hardly ever again will a big-budget action movie have to take the risk of shooting for real, whether it's slithering snakes, or an actor being covered in bugs, or a man sliding under a truck.
Put your head up just a little if you can, that's it.
So we're going to go behind the scenes to bring you just a taste of how they used to make movies way back in the 20th century. Fundamentally, this is the story of a trio of men. George Lucas was the whiz kid from the University of Southern California, whose science fiction film THX 1138 led him to Francis Coppola, American Graffiti, and the groundbreaking worldwide hit Star Wars.
The script, you're supposed to hate fire. Why do you like fire?
Steven Spielberg's television film Duel was so outstanding it was released in cinemas. He was still in his 20s when he made the masterpiece Jaws, and followed it with his own science fiction film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Hello. 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 How are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm smart.
Yeah,
Thank you. Whee.
Harrison Ford served his apprenticeship in television series like Gunsmoke and The Virginian. Lucas and Francis Coppola spotted him for American Graffiti and Coppola's The Conversation. Then George cast him as Han Solo, and the rest is history. The inspiration for Indiana Jones came to George Lucas from cinema itself.
When I was thinking about doing a sort of modern fairy tale couched in sort of Saturday matinee serial vernacular, I was thinking about all the great things I can do, and obviously one of the subjects that came up was to do it in outer space and do it sort of like Flash Gordon, and the other idea I had at the same time was really to do it about an archaeologist who goes around finding ancient artifacts that have sort of a supernatural flavor to them. And both of them would be kind of a serial, non-stop action kind of adventure.
I've always wanted to direct a James Bond picture. And George, so I got that beat. I said, what do you mean? He said, I have a better idea. It's called Raiders of the Lost Ark.
And so I sat down and kind of told him the story about this archaeologist and how it was like a Saturday matinee serial, and he got in one mess after another, and he just said, fantastic, let's do this. Indiana was my dog. He was this big, huge Malamute, would sit next to me in the car, giant bear of a dog. And so I named the character after my dog, and ultimately we put that in the movie. Originally when I wrote this, it was Indiana Smith, and then when I told the story to Steven, he said, I love it, it's fantastic, let's go with it. He said, there's only one thing I don't like. And I said, what's that? He said, I don't like the name. And I said, well, all right. Well, what if we call him Indiana Jones? He said, okay, that's fine.
Spielberg saw Harrison Ford as a natural for the part, but Lucas was reluctant at first.
And I said, oh, Steven, I said, he's been in 2 of my movies. I don't want him to be my Bobby De Niro. I don't want to have every movie I make star Harrison.
But after testing many actors, Steven's view prevailed. Now it's impossible to think of anyone else in the role.
George called me up and told me that he wanted me to meet Steven Spielberg, who I'd not met before, and sent over a script. I read the script, about which I was very enthusiastic, and went over to Steven's house to meet him. And we had a wonderful discussion. I got along very well, and I was reluctant to sign up for 3 films. But knowing the people involved, I was willing to sign up for 3 in the case of Indiana Jones.
Despite the talents on offer, the film didn't easily get off the ground.
I had to get the film financed. small detail. The film did get turned down by everybody in town. Nobody would do it because everybody looked at this really gargantuan movie with lots of action and lots of stuff. And I was saying, I think we can do this for $20 million, and everybody's saying, we don't believe you. That's impossible. But I had talked to Stephen about the fact that we really need to do this like a TV show. We really need to do this like the actual serials were shot, really quick and dirty, use old-fashioned tricks, and not spend a lot of time on it.
Lucas put added pressure on his friend Spielberg. He needed this complicated action movie with its far-ranging African locations to be made in a very short time to fulfill the deal with Paramount.
My last 3 movies had gone over 100 days per film. Jaws took 155 days. Close Encounters was something like 110 days of shooting. And 1941, especially 1941, which to this day is my longest shooting schedule, was 178 days of shooting. And George said, Steve, you can't have 120 days to shoot Raiders in. I don't want to spend that kind of money on the movie. All I could possibly do to keep the budget in check was to storyboard every single shot I intended to put before an audience in a cutting order. Every shot I storyboarded, even right down to people talking to each other. And then I put it all up on boards and I began to edit what I absolutely thought was extraneous or superfluous or indulgent. I sort of policed the area and brought the movie down to the bare bones of how little do I need to get up on the screen to tell this story well. But with that sort of George over my shoulder kind of nagging at me to make sure I didn't over schedule these days, I shot the movie in 73 days.
Common to all 3 films is a quest, the Ark of the Covenant containing the 10 Commandments of Jehovah, which Moses brought down from on high. Then the missing Sankara stones, which guarantee prosperity and good harvests. And the Holy Grail, which gives everlasting life to those who drink from it. Standing in Indiana's way, 3 increasingly vicious enemies. Ronald Lacey as Tote, the brutal Nazi torturer.
You Americans, you're all the same. Always overdressing for the wrong occasions.
The famed Bollywood star Amrish Puri as Mola Ram, who uses child slaves to dig for the sacred stones.
Soon we will have all the 5 Shankara stones, and the Thuggies will be all powerful.
My name is Donovan, Walter Donovan. I know who you are, Mr. Donovan.
And finally, Gillian Glover as Dr. Walter Donovan, smooth on the surface, but a covert collaborator with the Nazis. The trio of leading ladies was refreshingly different. Karen Allen was Marion Ravenwood, the daughter of an archaeologist and an old girlfriend of Indy.
Always knew someday you'd come walking back through my door.
And then you crash an airplane. You crash an airplane.
After a tough audition, Kate Capshaw got the part of Willie Scott, a showgirl who fixed her fingernails in the midst of danger.
I hurt my fingers and I cracked a nail.
Dr. Elsa Schneider.
And Alison Doody got the mysterious part of Dr. Elsa Schneider, a double-crossing femme fatale.
Don't look at me like that. We both wanted to go out.
These were no roles for the squeamish. All 3 accompanied Indy through hideous ordeals. Karen Allen got snakes and skeletons.
Harrison's in these long, hefty pants on, and he's got the whip, and he's hat. I'm in this little white dress with nothing on my arms and nothing on my legs, and of course I have to lose a shoe, which of course is part of the fun of the whole thing.
You make me do the most awful things. I have to play with bugs.
Get in the set and do the bugs.
No.
Do the bugs.
No.
Do the bugs.
No.
I did take something that was like a relaxant, and I came to the set. I was like, "Hi, Stephen." He goes, "Hi." He said, "Now stand here. We're going to pour some bugs on top of you." All right. Where will they be coming from? Well, we're going to pour a bunch of buckets of bugs from up above you, and they're going to just come down onto you, and it's going to be several buckets.
Okay, we got to get Robert down here. We don't have enough bugs to make the scene work. We need 50,000
For Alison Doody, the female lead in Last Crusade, was an enormous break.
I was living in London and I simply went for the audition thinking there was no possibility of me getting it because I was 21 and Irish and they were looking for a 29-year-old Austrian. Before that I'd done some TV, I'd done work with Jonathan Pryce, I'd done a Bond film, A View to a Kill, playing Jenny Flex. I think I was one of the first girls that they saw. I auditioned and met with Steven Spielberg and everybody, and then they asked me to come back to do a screen test. I remember thinking, oh God, you know, will it be me? And I was lucky. I was really lucky. Basically, I had to acquire an Austrian accent, so I did a lot of work for that. And before I knew it, I was on the set shooting the first day, and it was actually one of the last scenes. So I arrived on set with Harrison Ford, and Sean Connery, and Denholm Elliott, and Steven Spielberg, and George Lucas, and little Alison Doody, and with an Austrian accent filming one of the last scenes. So I was really thrown in the deep end.
But she soon discovered that if you spell the word star backwards, it becomes rats.
I put bugs in Kate Capshaw's hair, put snakes around Kieran Allen's neck, and now we were putting rats in Allison's hair. I mean, do we have any shame? No, we don't.
That was a big bone of contention as well at the audition. They were asking whether I would have a problem with that scene, and I said absolutely not. They're not your average sewer rat.
We raise those rats from infancy because in order to have rats that aren't infected with some virus or disease, you have to basically cultivate them from you know, living births. So our animal handlers gave birth to something like 2,000 living rats.
However, Elsa was a bit of a rat herself, not just in her spy persona, but by sleeping with Indy and his dad.
How did you know she was a Nazi? She talks in her sleep.
I said to George, there's only one person that can play Indy's father, and that's you know, James Bond. And the original James Bond, and the greatest James Bond, Sean Connery.
I can't forget how wonderful it was.
Thank you. It was rather wonderful.
There was an ulterior motive for this new character, to lighten up the series after the Temple of Doom.
I think we went darker than any of us really wanted to go. But you're in the middle of it and you're doing things, and it's a matter of what you do every moment. Because you do a little dark thing here, and then you do a light thing, and then you do another little dark thing, and then you do another little dark thing, and pretty soon you put together and you realize, uh-oh, it's darker than it is light. And this stuff is stronger than we thought of it as. And you don't realize what has happened until you put it all together and you see it as one piece.
With Sean Connery, the darkness dissolved into humor.
I had a lot of notes, as usual, about the whole piece. And, I mean, after all, if you're going to make a film with the father of Indy, you really have to have some kind of eccentricities and what have you. And anyway, at first it didn't bode too well, because I think George had a different idea, Lucas, of what it was about. Probably a bit more Calvin-like and conservative in that way. Anyway, when we went to the meeting at Amblin with George and Stephen, it went very well.
Junior? Yes, sir. There was so much humor to be mined in a father-son movie, especially when they haven't been getting along in 20 years. The fact that Indy's dad keeps topping Indy. He uses the umbrella to make the birds, the seagulls, take flight and then get caught up in the props of the Messerschmitt.